This is the Jared Brennan Disorder Podcast. I'm Jared Brennan, and this is the theme music. Hello and greetings. Hello and greetings are basically the same thing, but, you know, there's something a bit snazzier about saying it in a double-barrel manner. Today I will be continuing with the Bounce novella. It seems that a few people are actually getting into the story right now. I'm hearing a bit of good feedback about it, and thank you so much for letting me know that you're enjoying it. It gives me the motivation to keep recording these things, and it makes it feel like I'm not just talking into dead air. Today I'm also going to try standing up again, because I do feel like it opens up my lungs and whatnot, and there may be less instances of me breathing right directly into the mic if I do it this way. I also plan to upgrade my equipment at some point so we get a better sound quality. I had a really interesting meeting with a guy called Denis Halligan the other day. He's an actor's agent, one of the only full-time ones in Belfast as far as I'm aware, and he showed me his cool setup in his office on Botanic Avenue. And I'll tell you which number because the poor guy got robbed not so long ago. We live in a world where crime fiction isn't always fiction. He lost some expensive equipment and stuff like that, because as nice as Belfast is these days, it's still full of robbing wee fuckers, you know. So Dennis never got those microphones back. I'm not going to advertise the kind of equipment he has or anything like that, but one thing he did show me that can't actually be stolen is that he's got an isolation booth, which is really well set up. He rents it out to people who are in the industry, because it is so well done, but this is something the dude made with his own hands, and it has my head spinning, thinking about what I could do with an old shower in my bedroom if I just kitted it out to look like a studio, you know. But until things start paying out a little bit better, I don't think I'll be rushing out to B&Q just yet to buy all the wood and whatnot to convert my old shower into a sound isolation booth. But it's a nice wee dream to have for the future. In the meantime, if I want to do something really high grade audio wise, then I will probably give Dennis a shout, because the setup is just class, really cool. And the guy knows a lot about these kind of things because he does voiceovers and things like that for real television and real radio ads, you know. And he's got one of them voices that can switch in a heartbeat. He did some class impressions and stuff when we were chatting and had me in stitches. He's a good lad. But enough about that guy. This is the Jared Brennan Podcast, not the Denis Halligan Podcast. Apologies to the nice guy and all that. The reason that I am sort of treading water a bit vocally today is that I didn't really do much this morning. I've spent a lot of time trying to find my cheap-ass equipment. My sons found my voice recorder during the weekend and had a great old laugh listening to some of the excerpts, you know, the bits that you guys don't get to hear. They got the bonus material, which are usually punctuated with a curse whenever something has come up and ruined the recording. So I had to put it in a place where I could hide it better, so they wouldn't delete files or, you know, repeat some of my coarser language in school or something like that. But I put it in such a good place that I couldn't actually find it this morning, so that was a bit of crack. You wouldn't get this if you had your own isolation booth, you see, kitted out, and, you know, one that you could lock as well. It's another reason for me to maybe invest in one of these things in the near future. One of the things Dennis told me as well was that my assumption that standing up and reading was probably better energy-wise and, you know, for my lungs and things like that I wasn't just talking through my hat, that was actually a thing. So that was kind of cool. So I'm trying standing up again, like I said earlier. Only thing is, there's a little plastic bag right at my feet here that I hadn't noticed when I started talking, so let's just pause the proceedings for a second while I take care of that so that I can move about more freely, should I choose to. The joys of living in a busy family home. Your office is not your own, especially when it's also the bedroom you share with your wife. Anyway, today I'm changing it up slightly. I've been thinking a lot about other writers' work, as I often do, because that is where we find inspiration and whatnot. And right now I have a copy of the Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett in my hand. And last Saturday I did an event with the playwright Rosemary Jenkinson where we read from the work of writers who have influenced our work directly. And Dashiell Hammett formed a big chunk of the PhD I did on creative writing. And so it seems only fitting that I read from his thing, as his thing influences my thing. In the Maltese Falcon, there's a little chapter called G in the Air, in which he relates a story about a guy called Charles Flitcraft. And I'm going to read that because it's short and it works almost like a little short story. If you're busting to get on to bounce, you know, you can forward through this, but I will call you a Philistine if you do. I won't really, I'll just be grateful that you even give a damn about my wee story, but I do think this is really good, so give it a chance. It's obviously American set, but I don't have an American accent. I'm hoping that anybody from America who's listening to this can understand me, and I'm not going to insult you by trying to put some sort of weird southern drawl on a story that is actually set in San Francisco. I've tried that before, and I didn't realise just how bad my American accent really is. I mean, us Irish are really the first ones to complain about a British or American actor putting on an Irish accent for one of their parts in a film. And the thing is, that kind of goes both ways, doesn't it? I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I was laughing at Brad Pitt's accent in The Devil's Own and then putting on one that is just fucking terrible, say the version relatable almost to Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins trying to do a Cockney accent, which is how mine would probably come out. So let's just pretend that Spokane and Tacoma in America are somewhere in the wilds of Northern Ireland, and that Sam Spade is a wee guy who was born south of the border, grew up most of his life in Warren Point, and moved to Belfast for a while and now lives in Dundrum, because that's how I got my accent. And in this universe, in this telling of this story, Sam Spade has got a similar childhood because he has my accent. I sniffed so loud there that the cat jumped. God, I'm going to have to start editing sound out of these things. Not today, because I just want to get going. I have a lot of stuff to do today. And I've also got that event with Simon Maltman tonight in Bangor. While you're hearing this is probably going on, so it's a bit late trying to advertise that, but it seems like Simon's been working his backside off to get plenty of people going to that, and I have kind of high hopes for it. I hope they're not dashed. High hopes are sometimes a dangerous thing, but for now, right in this present moment, and this is the kind of thing I'm trying to enjoy, is the present moment. I have that little excitement of maybe there'll be a lot of people there and this event will be really good fun, there'll be a great vibe off it. So rather than concentrating on the nerves of actually having to perform at this thing by reading, and we're actually going to play a couple of songs at it as well, because we're both guitarists and singers. Simon much more talented than I am, but that's besides the point. I'll grab onto his coattail and accept as much appreciation from the audience as they dish out to him anyway. But yeah, by the time you're listening to this, the event's probably over. But if we get any footage or recording or anything like that from it, I will make that available. Back to Dashiell Hammett. In his bedroom there was a living room, now that the wall bed was up. Spade took Bridget O'Shaughnessy's hat and coat, made her comfortable in a padded rocking chair. Spade sat down in the armchair beside the table, and without any preliminary, without an introductory remark of any sort, began to tell the girl about a thing that had happened some years before in the Northwest. He talked in a steady, matter-of-fact voice that was devoid of emphasis or pauses, though now and then he repeated a sentence slightly rearranged, as if it were important that each detail be related exactly as it had happened. A man named Flitcraft had left his real estate office in Tacoma to go to a lunch one day that had never returned. He did not keep an engagement to play golf after 4 that afternoon, though he had taken the initiative to make the engagement less than half an hour before he went out to lunch. His wife and children never saw him again. His wife and he were supposed to be on the best of terms. He had 2 children, boys, one 5 and the other 3. He owned his house in Tacoma, a new Packard, and the rest of the appurtenances of successful American living. Flitcraft had inherited $70,000 from his father, and with his success in real estate was worth something in the neighbourhood of $200,000 at the time he vanished. His affairs were in order, though there were enough loose ends to indicate that he had not been setting them in order preparatory to vanishing. A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after, the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." Well, that was in 1922. In 1927, I was at one of the big detective agencies in Seattle. Mrs. Flitcraft came in and told us somebody had seen a man in Spokane who looked a lot like her husband. I went over there. It was Flitcraft, all right. He had been living in Spokane for a couple of years as Charles Pierce. He had an automobile business and was netting 20 or 25,000 a year. He had a wife, a baby son, owned his home in a Spokane suburb, and usually got away to play golf after 4 in the afternoon during the season. Spade had not been told very definitely what to do when he found Flitcraft. They talked in Spade's room at the Davenport. Flitcraft had no feeling of guilt. He had left his first family well provided for, and what he had done seemed perfectly reasonable to him. The only thing that bothered him was a doubt that he could make that reasonableness clear to Spade. He had never told anybody his story before, and thus had not had to attempt to make its reasonableness explicit. He tried now. "I got it all right," Spade told Bridget O'Shaughnessy. But Mrs. Flitcraft never did. She thought it was silly. Maybe it was. Anyway, it came out all right. She didn't want any scandal, and after the trick he'd played on her, the way she looked at it, she didn't want him. So they were divorced on the quiet, and everything was swell all around. Here's what had happened to him. Going to lunch, he passed an office building that was being put up, just the skeleton. A beam or something fell 8 or 10 stories down and smacked the sidewalk alongside him. It brushed pretty close to him, but didn't touch him, though a piece of the sidewalk was chipped off and flew up and hit his cheek. It only took a piece of skin off, but he still had the scar when I saw him. He rubbed it with his finger, well, affectionately, when he told me about it. He was scared stiff, of course, he said, but he was more shocked than really frightened. He felt like somebody had taken the lid off life and let him look at the works. Flitcraft had been a good citizen and a good husband and father, not by any utter compulsion, but simply because he was a man who was most comfortable in step with his surroundings. He had been raised that way. The people he knew were like that. The life he knew was a clean, orderly, sane, responsible affair. Now a falling beam had shown him that life was fundamentally none of these things. He, the good citizen, husband, father, could be wiped out between office and restaurant by the accident of a falling beam. He knew then that men died at haphazard like that and lived only while the blind chance spared them. It was not primarily the injustice of it that had disturbed him. He accepted that after the first shock. What disturbed him was the discovery that in sensibly ordering his affairs, he had got out of step, not into step with life. He said he knew before he had gone 20 feet from the fallen beam that he would never know peace again until he had adjusted himself to this new glimpse of life. By the time he had eaten his lunch, he had found his means of adjustment. Life could be ended for him at random by a falling beam. He would change his life at random by simply going away. He loved his family, he said, as much as he supposed one was usual. But he knew he was leaving them adequately provided for, and his love for them was not of the sort that would make absence painful. He went to Seattle that afternoon, Spade said, and from there by boat to San Francisco. For a couple of years he wandered around, then drifted back to the northwest and settled in Spokane and got married. His second wife didn't look like the first, but they were more alike than they were different. You know, the kind of woman that play fair games of golf and bridge and like new salad recipes. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. It seemed reasonable enough to him. I don't think he knew he had settled back naturally into the same groove he had jumped out of in Tacoma. But that's the part of it I always liked. He adjusted himself to beams falling, and when no more of them fell, he adjusted himself to them not falling. Well now, that's that. One of the most interesting things about that piece is that it was written before, but published in 1929. Let that sink in for a little second. 1929. And I feel like that story's still relevant because, it's dealing with some deep shit that I'm not going to get into, but it's kind of a little existentialist piece, isn't it? A bit about nature and nurture and habit and free will, and there's plenty in there to keep you up at night, if you're a troubled sleeper as I am. I do want to apologise to the late great Dashiell Hammett, though. I took a few liberties with the script there. For instance, I swapped the word luncheon for lunch because it made me stumble over sentences in my practice readings. I dropped a few sentences that related to the wider arc of the story because they just simply weren't relevant. It would have slowed down the pace of the reading. And I stumbled a few sentences as well because, I'm human, I make mistakes, but I'm happy enough to own them for now. If I was charging for this podcast, I would probably go back and edit and fix those little stumbly sentences, but for now, you get that live, raw, feeling as if this is a bootleg EP of me on stage performing the Flitcraft story to 1,000 people, because that's the kind of thing that is likely to happen, But that's the end of that. I am done reading other people's work for the day. I will now read a few chapters from Bounce. If you are fast forwarding through the Dashiell Hammett story, please go back and listen to it. It really is good, and maybe pick up a copy of that book. Not that he needs the money anymore. Unfortunately, he is gone, but his work does deserve to live on forever. You probably notice a few of the things that might make you go, what? Like the salad recipe thing. Let's just pretend that wasn't sexism coming from Dashiell Hammett, but rather from his character. But again, this was 1929, so a few of these things would have been unchallenged. I don't blame you if you pick that out, and it's probably a good thing. Who the fuck is interested in salad recipes? Seriously, it's just green shit with some meat in it if you're lucky. Anyway, from challenging sexism to challenging homophobia, we'll continue with the story Bounce. If you are tuning in for the first time because I read from Dashiell Hammett, thank you and welcome to the podcast. But I would suggest you go back to episode 1 so that you're not lost along the way with this story. Right now we're about to read chapter 16, which is titled Easy Like Sunday Morning. And like I say, if you haven't been here from the start, you're going to be a little bit lost. So go back now, and then pick it back up here whenever you get this far. Chapter 16. Easy Like Sunday Morning. I cook a different sort of breakfast on a Sunday morning. A quick one. You see, I do the roast every week as well. Something light is the only way to go. A warm-up before the feast. This week it's bagels with cream cheese and bacon. Bagels, my ma would have something to say about that. God rest her. My wrist is still tender. Nothing a few painkillers won't take the edge off. But I don't like the thought of a weakness in the light of last night's decision to go after Big Billy. I don't want to afford him any advantages. Sammy said that this scumbag likes to drinking Castros on a Sunday. No prizes for guessing what I'm going to do later. I have no real plan other than to show up at the pub and see if he arrives. After that I'll have to figure out how to lure him away from witnesses without causing a scene. I'm not going to panic about the details. An opportunity will present itself, and then he's mine. Smells great, love. Maria slaps my backside playfully. I didn't even realise she'd come in. Morning, love. I turn and look her up and down. You're looking well. Ach, saunter on. She primps her red bedhead hair and adjusts the hang of her dressing gown. You're no oil painting yourself. You want 2 rashers or 3? Oh God, just 2. Happy days. More for me then. Did you give our Sean a shout there? I did, yeah. He'll be down in a minute. I nod and start dishing out the grub. Sean surfaces just as his plate hits the table. It's like a sixth sense. Cheers, Daddy. No worries, son. He tucks right in without another word. Makes me smile. His bedhead would rival his mother's today. I have an urge to take a picture of the two of them side by side, dishevelled and silently stuffing themselves. We hardly ever take pictures of each other anymore. All these phones with cameras in the house too. It's never been easier to capture a moment like this, but it occurs to me less and less the older Sean gets. I discount this as a Kodak moment though. None of us will want a reminder of the bruises on Sean's face. I take a seat instead and demolish my own bagel. The food is reduced to crumbs and satisfied size in a matter of minutes. We sip on tea and enjoy the rare moment of unity at the table. None of us go to mass anymore, so there's no rush. We can sit on as long as we like. Did Daddy show you the picture? What picture? The wee frigger. He knows I wasn't going to tell Maria. I'd said as much last night, just before heading down to Underground. He reckons he's identified the attacker. Why didn't you tell me? Maria asks, her voice an octave higher than usual. This whole thing's taken enough out of you. You wouldn't have slept a wink last night if I told you about it. You're full of shite, she says. What are you up to? Happy now? I ask Sean. At least he has the good grace to look contrite. Don't put this on him. You should have told me, and you know it, Paddy. I feel myself sag. She's right. Sorry, love. Never mind that now. What's done is done. She takes a sip from her tea and then nods to herself as if she's reached some decision. Show me the picture. I want to see the creep that hurt our Sean. I take a gulp of tea and carry it in my mouth up the stairs. The printout is still in the back pocket of my jeans. I pick them up off the bedroom floor and notice they're a bit grubby from the fight with Skeet Boy. Better throw them in the wash basket. I empty the pockets onto the dressing table, wallet, car keys and some shrapnel, but keep a hold of the photo. Maria's not slow. She'll know rightly that I'm going to track this Billy Lorimer down on my own, that I've no intention of going to the police. No doubt I'll have to talk her out of taking the info to them herself. I decide to keep his name to myself, and I won't mention that Sammy was able to identify him. That will buy me some time. I plod back down the stairs and rejoin my family at the table. Maria holds her hand out for the picture. I give it to her, still folded. She takes a deep breath before straightening the sheet. I watch her, wait for her reaction. It's swift. She slams the page down on the table. Disgust contorts her face. The age of him, Maria says. That's a middle-aged man, Paddy. What's wrong with him that he's picking on teenagers? Now it's probably not the time to point out that James Cooper is 23. Some people are just twisted, love. It's a simple explanation, and true. Are you sure this is the man? She asks Sean. The more I look at it, the surer I get, Mommy. I'll never say I'm 100%. He looks into his cup. Because I was pretty drunk. But the feeling I get when I look at those eyes is the same as the other night. Maria turns to me. So what are you going to do with this? I'll ask around a few of the bars and clubs, see if anybody knows his name. And then what? I'll take the information to the peelers. I don't believe you. I'm not asking you to, love. That right? Well, tell me this. What use will you be to me and Sean if you get banged up for assault? Stop fretting, Maria. I'm not going after the scumbag. The house phone loses its shrill ringtone. All three of us freeze, spines straight and faces worried. The landline never rings on a Sunday. The odd sales call comes in during the week, but weekends it may as well be unplugged. None of us want to volunteer, but I'll get it, I say. It's a peeler. We get the pleasantries out of the way. I can sense he wants to get to the point. Sorry to have to tell you this, sir. James Cooper passed away last night. Jesus Christ, you're not serious. I'm afraid so. Which changes things slightly. This has now become a murder inquiry, and as such we'll need to arrange a date to talk to your son again. How come? It's not like he'll have any more information than he gave you. It's just procedure. Nothing to worry about, of course. Your son isn't a suspect. I should fucking think not. But I hold my tongue. No point shooting the messenger. The peeler gives me a number for Sean to ring when he's ready to talk to them. I wish him luck in the investigation before hanging up. Then I drag my feet back to the kitchen. Two pairs of eyes track my every movement as I take my place at the table. Fuck you, Billy Lorimer. Fuck you. Chapter 17. Approach the bench. Maria comes out and sits beside me in the garden. She leans into my side. I put an arm around her narrow shoulders and half hug her. She sniffles. Is he alright? I ask. Not one bit. It was an awful shock, wasn't it? I've left him in his room to have a wee cry. Better out than in, hey? I guess so. We sit in silence for a few minutes. I let my thoughts wander. They don't get very far. My mind's eye replays the phone conversation with the cop and the look on Sean's face as I broke the news. A constant loop of me passing more misery on to my son. I just want things to get better. For all of us. Maria clears her throat. It could have been our Sean. I know, love. What would we have done? There's no point thinking that way. I think I know what you would have done. Do you? I know what you would have done, and I wouldn't have blamed you. I hold my tongue. If she wants to talk me out of hunting down Billy Lorimer, she can do the work. I'll not draw it out of her. In fact, if something were to happen to the man that killed that poor boy, and hurt our Sean, and I'm not just talking about the bruises on his face, if something happened to that man, Maria dabs her face with the sleeve of her dressing gown, I'd be at peace with it. God forgive me. I'm careful not to ruin this moment. She might be giving me her blessing to do something unholy, or she might just be angry, saying things she doesn't mean. But if I play it right, maybe I can use this conversation to silence my conscience. It'll be one less distraction to believe that Maria is on my side. It's a natural reaction, love. I figure it's a safe enough statement, non-confrontational. I love you, Paddy. Love you too, Maria. And that's enough for me. I've got Maria's blessing. Chapter 18. Viva Castro. Castro's is a good wee bar. As I approach, I wonder why I don't spend more time there. Once I'm inside, I remember. Revolutionaries stare at me from iconic pictures on the wall. Already I feel that vague guilt that I should take more of an interest in politics. And the size, shape and style of me makes me more self-conscious too. I realise I look like a figure of authority, even in Sunday casual dress, jeans and a checked short-sleeve shirt, like an off-duty cop. There's a distinct vibe you get from the uniformed cops, especially when they're trying their hardest to disguise it. Bouncers have that too, you know. We probably bring it on ourselves by being overly sensitive to normal pub behaviour. With me, it's the way I narrow my eyes at the drunkest in the room, check for potential weapons on the tables and walls, ensure I know where all the exits are in case trouble kicks off. Being aware of a behaviour doesn't make it any easier to change, though. I bounce, therefore I am. I take a mad notion to stand on one of the tables and scream at the top of my lungs, "My son is gay!" as if that would admit me into the exclusive club for liberals. It's a good job I don't always do whatever the hell I feel like, though. For a start, there's only 3 people in this room. The barman and a couple at the corner of the bar. Together, but not. One reads his newspaper, the other plays with her phone. "What can I get you?" the barman says. "Pint of Guinness? I'll bring it down to you." Proper pub. I choose a table in the corner farthest from the door and plant myself on a wee wooden stool under a framed picture of some Indians. The kind that wear feathers in their hair. Native Americans. Jesus, if I can't get that right first time, I should really watch my mouth in this place. The last thing I want to do is stand out. Half the reason I picked this table is because somebody left their newspaper on it, so I can pretend to read and sup quietly at my pint and be like any old Joe off the street, craving a bit of peace. The other half of my reasoning I'm quite proud of. I can sit back, with my back against the wall, eliminating some of the judgment from the symbols of greater causes, and facing the door, ensuring that I see the bastard as soon as he danders in here for his Sunday evening piss-up. The articles at the front of the newspaper do nothing but depress me. Local news, international news, it's always bad fucking news wherever it's set. I flip it face down and find some journalism that matters. The Candy Stripes. Derry City Football Club. There's a Sligo Rovers match at the Brandywell in a few weeks, and our boys are looking good for it. There's a few injury worries, so technically Rovers are favourites, but the bookies are often wrong enough. I'm putting my money on our lads. It's not something I do for every match, just when it feels right. I took Sean to a Northwest Derby once. Didn't bet in that one. Turned out to be a total disaster too. He had me take him to the toilets at least 10 times, no word of a lie. I was sure somebody from our row of seats was going to punch me in the back of the head. We had them up and down like yo-yos. It was a shite match too. We lost, and we deserved it. On the way home I asked our Sean if he wanted to go with me again. I was thinking about buying a family season ticket. He told me he didn't like football. I joked with his mother that night that maybe he was gay. She didn't find it funny. I thought she was being uptight. Thinking back, she probably had the wee lad figured out already and was waiting for me to catch up. I was never the quickest that way. Case in point, I tried taking him to at least one match a year until he was 16. By then I knew he was gay, but I figured that didn't mean he disliked football. According to the internet, it's stereotypical or prejudice or whatever to think that way. But no, a son that liked football just wasn't on the cards for me. No big deal, I guess. What bothered me more was that I might not have any grandchildren. Maria put me straight on that one a few months ago. Apparently married gay couples can adopt children here now. Or couples in a civil partnership. The marriage thing still hasn't been fully sorted. Stupid distinction, isn't it? I always thought a civil partnership was two businessmen being nice to each other. I suppose it can be that too. A marriage, though? That ginger American comedian our Sean likes says it best. I approve of gay marriage. They deserve to be just as miserable as the rest of us. Louis C.K., that's the boy. I think he's feeling a bit more miserable than usual these days, mind you. I realise I'm grinning to myself. So does the barman as he comes to collect my glass. Something funny? He asks, in a good-natured way. It's a location joke, I say. He tilts his head. I clarify. You'd have to be there, you know. He taps his nose and asks me if I want another. I've the car with me again, but fuck it. Let's live dangerously. Aye, throw it in that glass just. I don't know why I said that. Dirty glasses turn me. Must be the spirit of Castro seeping into my bones. Or I'm just in good form. That changes when Billy Larmer darkens the door. So I figure that's a good wee cliffhanger to leave this week's instalment on. I keep saying this week's instalment. I'm actually putting these out every couple of days, which I'm quite proud of. And I'll do my best to continue that. So you'll not have to wait too long to find the next part and to be put out of your cliffhanger misery. But this is just a little over half an hour now, so I figure if you're listening to this in the car, you might be nearly where you're trying to get, or if you're just going for a walk or a run, you might be on your way back home. So it's probably a good enough length for a wee podcast like this. If it was me and somebody else, I probably would let them go a bit longer, but listening to one voice, I don't know, I just don't think you could really do an hour that way. Blindboy manages it in his podcast, which is one that I really enjoy. He talks a lot about mental health and things like that, and he was very active during the whole repeal the 8th referendum. So he uses his platform really well. But the thing is, he's got a really unusual Limerick accent, and he also has the ability to put a little bit of music underneath and edit his thing really well, and he has better equipment than me, I'm guessing, because the sound quality is much better. Whereas with my podcast, it's done a little bit on the cheap. It's mostly an audio book, although I still do these little conversational bits, as some people call them, at the end. I still have trouble thinking about this as a conversation because it makes me worry about my own mental health if I consider this a conversation. Really, this is just talking into an echo chamber, isn't it? Until I get some sort of feedback anyway. But yeah, we'll call time on this one. These are all sound. Keep her lit. I'll see you again soon.